West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
With me this morning are MSNBC legal analyst, former U.S. attorney in Alabama and co-host of the podcast Sisters-in-Law, Joyce Vance, and former federal prosecutor and host of the Justice Matters podcast, Glenn Kirshner. Good morning to both of you, my good friends. Glenn, let's start with you. That breaking committee news from last night about Rudy Giuliani. Why do you think Rudy finally decided to testify when so many of Trump's inner circle said, peace out, not going to do it, and especially after Rudy said that he would not do it if it wasn't going to be recorded?
Yeah, Katie, I don't know whether there is a cause and effect at play, but what have we learned in recent days? The Department of Justice has requested all of the transcripts from the January 6th committee for the 1,000 plus witnesses that have appeared before the committee and provided testimony. So all of a sudden, what do we learn? We learn that Bill Barr has apparently agreed to talk to the committee. And now we know that Rudy Giuliani has testified to the committee for 9 hours. Is there a cause and effect at play here? You know, there may be. But I will tell you the one thing that surprises me most about Rudy Giuliani having testified is that he did it at all, because I fully expected he would continue to offer privileges, whether legitimate or otherwise. He might have some legitimate attorney-client privilege claims with respect to information involving his representation of Donald Trump. He could try to assert an executive privilege claim, though I think that would be weak. But there is one privilege claim that he absolutely has. It's a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, because we know he is still under criminal investigation by the Southern District of New York after a federal judge issued a warrant concluding there was probable cause to believe there was evidence of crime in Rudy's electronic devices. So I don't know what the substance of his testimony was yesterday, but I would be surprised if he didn't try to assert a whole bunch of privileges.
I would also have been surprised if it was lucid and competent. So, Joyce, the Washington Post is reporting that Justice Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny Thomas, pressed Arizona lawmakers after the 2020 election to set aside the popular vote victory for Joe Biden and select a, quote, clean slate of electors. This is according to emails obtained by the Washington Post. Joyce, we already know about those Mark Meadows texts. Why is this not news enough, new news enough, to put Ginny Thomas in an interview seat to have to answer questions?
It should put Ginny Thomas in that interview seat, probably from the committee, certainly from the Justice Department. But, Katie, we live in this real world where there are sensitivities surrounding Supreme Court justices and their families. And I think it will be difficult, quite frankly, for people to navigate these issues where, in fact, it should be simple. Because if Ginny Thomas was anyone else with the sort of knowledge she's displayed on multiple issues, investigators would sit down and have a chat with her. Not necessarily that she's a target for investigation, but they would want to know what she knows. And most importantly here is this incredible coincidence that she's out pushing this same scheme that we know ultimately comes to fruition among those closest to Trump, this scheme to create blank slates of electors who aren't the choice of the people, but who instead are pansies for the former president, people who are supposed to go in and do his work for him. And that's a little bit too close for comfort, that coincidence. So that warrants further investigation.
And Joyce, your point's important, right? It's not just the insurrectionists and the events leading up to January 6th. It's, this slate of electors. It's not just the violence, but it's a violence on paper of disarming the vote for the people. Glenn, I want to stay on this issue of Justice Thomas. In recent comments, he has blamed the erosion of trust in the Supreme Court on the recent Roe draft leak. In light of these continuous revelations of his wife's repeated and extensive involvement in January 6th, shouldn't Chief Justice Roberts bench Clarence Thomas from, at the very least, any cases dealing with the insurrection or the 2020 election?
He should, but as Joyce said, the simple answers are not often the answers we seem to pursue. I believe we tend to overthink these things. Now, does the Chief Justice have the power, the authority to bench one of the other justices? Probably not, strictly speaking. But I think if Chief Justice Roberts takes seriously the eroding trust that the American people have in the Supreme Court and the confidence that it can sort of rise above partisan politics and do its job of dispensing justice equally and fairly on behalf of the American people, then he better do something, because Congress doesn't really have a lot of power when it comes to, installing regulations or rules governing Supreme Court justice behavior. It's really up to the Supreme Court itself to police its own misbehavior or bad actors. And thus far, it's fallen down on the job. And I think Chief Justice Roberts better try to do whatever he can do to try to shore up the public's perception of the legitimacy of the Supreme Court.
So, Joyce, new reports indicate that former Attorney General Bill Barr may testify before the committee. We talked about it in the intro into the segment. What do you think Barr would be willing to tell the committee? And frankly, how self-serving do you think that testimony would end up being?
It will likely be enormously self-serving. Barr knows that the one path forward that he can't take is to completely flout the committee's authority, because that's the one path forward that gets folks in trouble with the Justice Department, his former employer. It's important to remember that as the Attorney General, he was not the president's lawyer. There's no sort of attorney-client relationship. He might have executive privileges that he would be able to assert. But what you're interested in hearing from Bill Barr is, why did you leave when you did? Remember, he left just a few days before Christmas, saying he wanted to spend more time with his family at a point in the year where DOJ virtually shuts down for those last couple of weeks, and people, in fact, go home to take that time with their families. So that never rang true. The other issue that Bill Barr, if he's forthcoming, could provide a lot of information on would be President Trump's state of mind, because Barr was one of the officials who said, "We've looked, no fraud involved in this election." And of course, a central issue is whether Trump understood that there was no fraud and continued to try to hang on to power. Bill Barr, if he wanted to, could shed a lot of light on that. But it's unlikely that we'll hear much in the way of actual apparent truth from the former Attorney General. He has too much invested in the persona that he's created, his ties to folks who are on the Trump side of the equation. I think he'll try to tap dance a straight line up the middle.
Glenn, the January 6th committee, it has been busy. The other news that we just talked about concerns Georgia Representative Barry Loudermilk. We don't know if the January 6th committee actually has evidence of Congressman Loudermilk giving the tour, but he released a statement. And let's be clear, it wasn't a denial. He released a statement about giving a tour to a family. But we know that the committee's been really diligent in its investigation. The pace seems to be picking up. We've got the public hearings coming up in June. Does this news about Loudermilk lead you to believe, Glenn, that there's actually more to the story about these tours?
There clearly is some there, Katie, because remember, about 16 months ago, Congressman Loudermilk issues a statement saying, "I gave no reconnaissance tours." And then when he seems to be caught, at least based on the January 6th committee's assertion that we've got the tapes, we've got the goods, and we want you to come in and interview with us, he issues another statement. He says, "Well, I gave a tour on January 5th, the day before, but trust me, it was on the up and up. It was just a constituent family. I don't know if that's a euphemism for insurrectionist, but perhaps we'll find out. But why did he hide for 16 months the fact that at a time the protocols for COVID had the Capitol shut down to these kinds of tours? He felt compelled to give one on January 5th and then hide that fact for 16 months. The only remaining question is, will he continue to conceal relevant information from the committee, or will he comply with the committee's request and actually testify?
It is Monday, the 23rd of May of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. It's been a weekend, has it not? Yes. Mondays always follow the weekend, and weekends are especially more poignant now since the former guy is gone, because I'll tell you why it's poignant. Even though we still have a bit of news happening on the weekends, at least the former guy is gone, so to speak. At least he's not in the Oval Office. Yeah, you know, his kids continue to break the law. Reports of them breaking the law to the tunes of billions of dollars, by the way. But for some reason, because Hunter Biden made, $5 million? Or no, it was $11 million in 5 years. I don't know. The charter company, the Compass Rose Charters that I was executive chef, made about that much in 5 years too, and they were a small business. You know, it's only about $1 million, $2 million a year. Come on. Small businesses make that much, and in some ways barely squeak by. So I'm just saying, the Trump kids, Jared and Ivanka, $640 million while they were working in the Oval Office. Hunter Biden had no position in any form of government while his dad was VP. Let's be clear about that. Private citizen can do whatever they want, within reason. And I love the fact that everybody goes, oh, well, his only marketability was that he had the Biden name. Well, he actually has some chops. He actually went to school and got educated and worked on his own in private practice and with named firms, not just because his name is Biden, because would any of the Trump kids be able to do anything that they have been doing without the Trump name? Please. So you got Munchin and Jared brokering deals with the Sauds. And we get to hear about Hunter Biden's laptop. A laptop that was manipulated, changed overnight. Come on. Please. You got that. And then you got the Durham trial. What's up with that guy? We know exactly. It's so transparent what is going on there. I love the fact that nobody is bringing up that Comey put his finger on the scale, but for some reason, let's just take them at face value then. Hillary brought some information about Trump that may or may not have been true to the FBI that could have shown that he was colluding with the Russians. Let the FBI ferret it out. What's wrong with that? Do you think that there was no FBI investigation in Hillary over her server, Benghazi? And yet, just the threat of investigating Trump is enough to throw out all the evidence, all the trials, all of the investigations. It's just so transparent, brazen, in fact. And we put up with it. The hue and outcry over the DHS and the newly formed wing of the DHS. They call it the Disinformation Board. I don't like that name. How about anti-disinformation board? There we go. But a very competent woman, in fact, the one who suggested it, was run out by the right wing because of their outrage machine, and we folded once again like we did with quite a few of those in the Obama administration who were run out. To the point where there was even tapes manipulated that showed people saying things that they never said, and then you go to the original and it was the exact opposite of what was put out there for the media. I'm thinking of Shirley Sherrod, for instance. So, what is being done to appease the right-wing outrage machine? And why don't we just call them Nazis? Because that's exactly what they are. Let's not quibble around the edges anymore. They are Nazis. Oh, I know people will say, they're not really Nazis because Nazis have to form this. You know, stop telling me that this military-grade rifle is not an assault rifle. It's some other name. It does the same thing. All right? These Nazis are doing exactly the same thing. So what are we doing to appease the Nazis? And once again, as an aside, you don't appease the Nazis. Nothing will ever be enough. Didn't Joe Biden learn anything during the Obama administration? You give them what they want, and it's not good enough. You give them everything that they want, and it's still not good enough. You bend over backwards to maybe nominate those that you know that they embrace, but it still won't be good enough. And in the process, you've destroyed policies that you ran on so you can appease the Nazis. And what am I talking about? I'm hearing reports that to replace this competent woman, millennial lady, at the Anti-Disinformation Board at the DHS, the one who came up with the idea, expert in her field, they're going to replace her with Chertoff, a guy who brokers in disinformation. He's not there to be anti-disinformation. Please. Chertoff. What's next? I don't know. Who else can we pull out of the hat that we think they might like, and in the process? I don't know. We're going to keep DeJoy in at the Postal Service? Looks like it, huh? Is that appeasing the Nazis? For now it is. And what is happening with the Postal Service? So now we're going to have Chertoff running the supposed Anti-Disinformation Board. I don't think that looks good. I really don't. You don't negotiate with Nazis. You punch them. We should have doubled down on the lady who was in the Anti-Disinformation Board. Not give up. I'm tired of it. Trump was able to pack the courts with McConnell's help with almost 300 federal judges, and they're all doing their fine work undermining democracy at this very moment. And I'm not just making it up. There's reportage as such. Okay. Do we just cede the midterms to them? Oh, and I'm just going to reiterate one other thing. Down here in Southern Oregon, there was no Democratic challenger to the repug. I don't care if you're ceding this area to them. Run somebody. In every race, even if it's dog catcher. How do you think they're taking over school boards, huh? How do you think they're taking over city councils? They're not doing it nice either. They're doing it with threats, intimidation. They're doing it just like the Nazis. Okay. Oh, and for those right-wing haters out there on my Twitter timeline who say that I should give my money back for the education apparently I didn't receive because I don't know what a fascist is. I know exactly what a fascist is. And it's taken me a lifetime to come out and actually call an opposition figure a fascist or a Nazi. I was taught never to use that term, because apparently you destroyed your argument by mere use of it. Well, the person who taught me that was a world-renowned historian who happens to be my dad. So I tend to go with his assessment on issues, even though he's loath to give his assessment because it might be an opinion. And we form our own opinions now, don't we? Even my dad calls them Nazis and fascists. The gloves are off. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Now, if we could just convince a few more of our brethren, it might work. It might. Boy, do we have our work cut out for us, though, eh? Well, how about this? Why don't we give a rundown on what we have offered here today in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy as we begin here in the Bistro Cafe part of this great salon. Yeah, it's great because we say it is. I don't know. I think it's because we offer quite a variety of tidbits and morsels. All right. Well, as the January 6 hearings draw closer, new revelations continue to be revealed. And what else are we going to hear? On the rest of the menu, the first shipment of baby formula arrived in Indianapolis from Germany on Sunday yesterday, and we might as well call that Biden baby formula because he's the one that brokered it all. A government report found Trump's census plot to game apportionment might actually cost red states scores of seats. And the top elected GOP official in a rural and sparsely populated West Texas county has been arrested for cattle rustling. You know, they used to hang him high for that. After the break, we move to the chef's table where a line of violent thunderstorms tore across Canada from southern Ontario to southeast Quebec, killing at least 5 and cutting power to nearly 1 million people. And Russia banned 963 Americans, including Biden, Harris, journalists, lawmakers who have died, regular U.S. citizens, and even actor Morgan Freeman. But not Donald Trump. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by none other than the Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page, and please do become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. We need the help. We really do. If you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance. If you could send those funds to us once a month, we're able to stretch those dollars beyond compare, and then we pay our bills. And that allows us then to fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance against dark forces arrayed against not only the the United States of America, but representative democracy worldwide. Yeah, who knew the globalists would turn out to be Nazis and fascists? Uh-huh. All right. So we have our work cut out for us, and thank you for your help in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we thank Tom for doing so. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and I'll tell you why. Because when you do, that's where I post the show notes and links diary from Daily Co's that gets posted there about 10 minutes before showtime. And a lot of times during the clip, I get the show notes and links on Twitter, but that's where you would find it. So follow me there at Justice Putnam, because the show notes and links is where the real reportage can be found. We don't need shirt off for this job. Okay. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. Really, wherever podcasts can be found, and they're ubiquitous. They're everywhere. And also, the Netroots Radio Deep Archive can be found at the Internet Archive at archive.org. Okay. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays is Out of the Washington Post by Amy B. Wang, Andrew Zhang, and Carolyn Y. Johnson. A U.S. military plane filled with more than 70,000 pounds of baby formula arrived in Indianapolis yesterday, Sunday, from Germany, part of Operation Fly Formula, a Biden administration initiative that aims to quickly increase supplies of the food source amid a national shortage. Why don't we just call it the Berlin Airlift? I like that one better than Operation Fly. Shortly after 11 a.m. yesterday, that's Eastern Standard Time, just so you know, a C-17 loaded with Nestle's Alphamino Infant and Alphamino Junior formula, both hyperallergenic formulas that can be fed to babies intolerant of protein and cow's milk, arrived at Indianapolis International Airport, where the plane was greeted by Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack, sorry. He was in a pickle, but he's not a Vlasic. He's a Vilsack. Just, let's not be confused. Whew, okay, it's Monday. This shipment of formula serves a critical medical purpose and will help infants with specific dietary needs requiring specialized formula, Vilsack tweeted. At the airport, he told reporters that the formula would take care of 9,000 babies and 18,000 toddlers for a week. An additional 114 pallets of Gerber Good Start Extensive HA formula will be dispatched in the coming days, the White House said. Together, the shipments are enough to fill about 1.5 million 8-ounce bottles. The Biden administration announced yesterday, Sunday, that it would use the Defense Production Act to give 2 companies priority on ingredients or equipment necessary to manufacture formula. Oh, I guess we'll give it to Abbott because they've already proven how great they are at keeping their place clean. Abbott Nutrition will be able to make priority orders for sugar and corn syrup. Reckitt will be able to place priority orders for filters that have been constrained during the pandemic. We are working around the clock to do what we can to rapidly increase the safe supply of infant formula, from coordinating the logistics for incoming international flights to strengthening the supply chain of essential ingredients and materials. Don O'Connell, Health and Human Services Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, said in a news release. A second military flight will also transport Nestle formula from Ramstein Air Base in Germany to Washington Dulles International in the coming days. FedEx will then ship the formula onward to a Nestle plant in Pennsylvania. The Defense Secretary approved military aircraft for the shipments on Friday evening because no commercial aircraft were available. The process to ship formula from abroad would typically take 2 weeks. Instead, it took about 3 days because of the administration's work behind the scenes. This is a testament of the president's commitment to pulling every lever to get more infant formula onto the market. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre told reporters aboard Air Force One, and Operation Fly Formula is one tool that we are using to do so. Blake, also of the Washington Post, brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Trump administration spent an extraordinary amount of time and effort messing with the census over 4 years. Its apparent aim? It wanted to exclude undocumented immigrants from population counts, thereby allowing Republicans to draw more favorable maps in redistricting and gain more ground in the House. The effort ultimately failed, and it now seems possible that these efforts might have played a role in costing red state seats. A new report from the U.S. Census Bureau found that 14 states were significantly miscounted in the 2020 census, including 6 by 4 percentage points or more. At the high end, Hawaii's population was overcounted by an estimated 6.8 percentage points, while Arkansas was undercounted by 5. A trend you might notice if you pursue the data is that most of the states with significant overcounts were blue states like Hawaii, Delaware, Rhode Island, New York, and Massachusetts, while most with undercounts were red, southern states like Arkansas, Tennessee, Florida, Mississippi, and Texas. What that means when it comes to the post-census awarding of seats, a process known as apportionment, those red states might have been at a deficit because they were not given credit for their full populations. Blue states, on the other hand, might have been given more seats because the Census Bureau thought they contained more people than they actually did. Exactly how the new data might have changed things is not totally clear. It's difficult to gauge that with any certainty, given the margins of error involved in the new survey, the interplay between states' populations in the apportionment calculations, and the fact that the new data are limited in some key ways. But it's pretty evident that incorrect numbers probably allowed 2 blue-leaning states with overcounts, Minnesota and Rhode Island, to keep seats they should not have, given that they just barely cleared the bar for keeping those seats. Minnesota kept its seat by a scant 26 people, and both states had been expected to lose seats before the Bureau announced otherwise. On the flip side, the undercounts in Florida and Texas might well have cost those 2 red-leaning state seats that they were on the cusp of adding. Texas did gain 2 other seats, but its 1.9% undercount was enough to deprive it of 500,000 people in apportionment. In pre-census population projections, both states had been on track to gain an additional seat. Though I should add that in the Texas example, the undercounts were primarily in black and Hispanic districts. press staff bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. The top elected official in a rural and sparsely populated West Texas county has been arrested after being accused of stealing cattle. Loving County Judge Skeet Jones, age 71, and 3 other men were arrested on Friday on charges of livestock theft and engaging in organized criminal activity. All 4 men were taken to jail in neighboring Winkler County, where they have since been released on bond. Jones has not returned a call seeking comment. The arrest came after a year-long investigation, according to a statement from the Texas and Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association. The association has commissioned peace officers, known as special rangers, who investigate agricultural crimes, including the theft of cattle and horses. The rangers also determine the ownership of stray livestock. The association's special rangers allege that Jones and the others gathered stray cattle and sold them without following procedures set forth in the Texas Agricultural Code. Those procedures include calling the sheriff to report stray livestock and allowing the sheriff to search for the animal's owner, which is interesting because this judge is also the only sheriff. The association declined to provide additional details about the case, citing the ongoing investigation. The theft of livestock carries a sentence of up to 10 years in prison, while the organized criminal activity charge carries a sentence of up to 20 years in prison. Loving County, which is located along the Texas-New Mexico border, is the state's least populated county. It has a population of 57 residents. And Jones, Skeet, has been in office since 2007. That's a lot of cattle rustling. Okay, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, The Past is Back. Director Audrey Dewan couldn't possibly have timed it better, but her latest film, The Happening, made its American debut a week after a leaked memo suggested that the U.S. Supreme Court is on its way to overturning the decision which legalized abortion in the U.S. nearly 50 years ago. If you were born post-Roe and ever wondered what it would look like if abortion services weren't available, then The Happening offers a terrifying glimpse. Set in early 60s France and based on the memoir, the same name, the main character, Anne, finds herself pregnant. As a promising young college student, Anne knows she doesn't want to be a mother, but her choices are limited. Not only is abortion illegal in that era in France, but she could be criminally charged if she is found out to have terminated the pregnancy. Nonetheless, she's willing to take her chances, and most of the movie's screen time is spent following her, navigating the seedy French criminal underworld to find an abortion provider who at least looks survivably competent. At times, the movie is as much a thriller as it is a drama, and even verges on horror when 2 abortion attempts are shown in graphic detail. Worse still is how Anne is treated on her lonely journey. As she tells the father, who is financially and emotionally unsupportive, she will take care of it, which is what she does. Not only is Anne relatable, but the characters manage a vaguely contemporary look with respect to their clothes and hairstyles, probably not by accident, amidst the period sets. If certain parties get their way, this one could end up as a rip from the headlines piece in short order. Not that the U.S. Supreme Court cares what the majority of Americans want. One struggles to imagine just who wants a return to the world portrayed in The Happening. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is 60 Second Science. I'm Tulika Bose. You might know that a leaked memo recently revealed that Roe v. Wade could be overturned, which could have massive implications for women's health. What you might not know is how your trusty smartphone could be used to enforce that. I'm here with Sophie Bushwick, our tech editor, who is going to go a little bit more into depth about the ramifications of this. Hey, Sophie.
Hi.
So tell me about this. What's going on?
So in the wake of news about the potential fall of Roe v. Wade, it came to light that about 13 states have what are called trigger laws on the books. So these are laws that would kick in as soon as Roe v. Wade would be overturned and would immediately make abortion partially or entirely illegal in those states. Some people were worrying online about the potential need to delete data from their period tracking apps. I decided to look more into this question. Can your period tracking app reveal information that could later land you in court? And what I found was period tracking apps are really the tip of the iceberg. The real issue is that your phone gathers a huge amount of data about you every single day. And yes, that data can be used to reveal if you're pregnant and if you plan to or do obtain an abortion.
Tell me a little bit more about your phone being this major tracker of information. I know it records a huge volume of data, but what are some of the things that your phone could be recording that could then be used against you in court?
Most people carry their phones with them wherever they go, and your phone tracks your location. Every time you look something up on the internet or you use an online browser to make a search, that can be recorded by the companies whose apps you have on your phone. If you have a period tracking app on your phone, you might enter data on your period, and that can calculate your fertility. It can even tell if you're pregnant before you know that yourself. Your phone can figure things out, like how often someone goes to the bathroom.
Okay, that is wild. Your phone can tell how often you go to the bathroom?
If you know which data to pull from a phone, yes, you could figure out what somebody's bathroom habits are. A phone is a very useful surveillance tool. It is dystopian because we don't have a lot of legal restrictions on what data companies are allowed to gather, on how long they're allowed to keep that data.
Okay, so we know that if basic activity like seeking reproductive health care becomes criminalized, experts have said courts could even issue a warrant for your device, which would then reveal all of that personal information you were talking about. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about that?
That's right. If somebody is involved in a court case, their phone, the information can be extracted from it, and then all that trove of data can be used against them in court. But something that's actually a little bit more worrying for privacy experts is the way that law enforcement can sidestep the need for a warrant at all. Something that has a lower bar than a warrant is a subpoena, and that can be issued to a company that collects data, and you wouldn't need to get the data directly from a person's phone in that case. You could just get it from the company that gathers the data.
I would like to know if there's precedent. Has that been done before? Have people's devices been used in a case of subpoena or anything like that?
Yes. Probably the most well-known example is a case in Mississippi where a woman had a miscarriage. It was suspected that she had induced it. So in order to find intent, law enforcement used information from her phone that showed that she had searched for how to induce a miscarriage. And as a result of this, she was indicted for second-degree murder by a grand jury. Now, in this case, the charges against her were later dropped. But in a post-Roe world, in a state where abortion is illegal, you could very easily see a case where people who experience a miscarriage then become criminal suspects.
I want to talk about the period tracking apps, and I want to talk about HIPAA. So are period tracking apps protected by HIPAA?
No. So HIPAA is a law that basically says, your healthcare provider can't share your healthcare information without your consent. But a period tracking app does not count as a healthcare provider. It's not covered by HIPAA. So period tracking apps have the ability to sell your data to data brokers and to other entities. Obviously, the most secure option is to not use one at all, but there are apps that prize security more than others. And so you do want to see what their privacy policies of these different apps are.
That's really good to know. And my last question, are there ways you can protect yourself right now?
So some tips include, if you want to hide your browsing activity more effectively, you could use a browser that's privacy-centric, like Tor or Bravo, or you could, if you're using another browser, you could use it in incognito or private mode. What you can do, if you really want to hide your activity more effectively, is use a VPN or virtual private network that prevents your internet service provider from snooping on your web activity. Another thing that you want to do in general is just have good security. You want to protect your phone with a strong password as opposed to using, a biometric unlocking mechanism. You should protect all your accounts with strong passwords. One of the best ways to do that is to use a password manager so that you don't have to remember a bunch of different long strings of symbols and letters and numbers.
We'll put a full list of tips in the transcript of this podcast as well, so just scroll down to the end and you can see some ways to keep yourself safe. Thank you so much, Sophie.
Thanks for having me.
For 60 Second Science, I'm Jalika Bose.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I never dreamed of growing up to be a political activist commentator, but here I am, and it worked out pretty well for me. I've been lucky enough to have a voice in public matters and eke out a modest living running my mouth as an independent populist agitator. Still, I have to confess to the sin of job envy, not in the sense of being resentful, but regretful about my own inability to lift the trade of journalistic commentary to the heights attained by a small, feisty collection of unique public opinionators, political cartoonists. In framing issues and rallying people to think and act, these journalists have an unfair advantage over us mere word crafters. They can literally draw a picture to make their point. They reach masses viscerally as well as cerebrally, and visceral usually outpunches cerebral. Editorial cartooning is a profession made up largely of progressive mavericks who enter the social, political, cultural fray with an abundance of anti-establishment audacity, an eye for irony, fondness for the underdog, and an ability to laugh at absurdity, plus artistic talent. Because cartooning is an expression of the human spirit that's been irrepressible since cave drawings, generation after generation of pen and ink champions of democracy blossomed. The general public's appreciation and demand for the cartoonist's unblinking honesty and satire have never flagged, even increasing whenever the artists come under public assault by autocrats, plutocrats, screwballs, and assorted other censors. These graphic editorial artists matter. Again and again, they've roused the public to rise up and put down corporate and political scoundrels, incrementally advancing our nation's democratic possibilities. As in the natural world, though, even the most beneficial creatures can be driven to extinction. This is Jim Hightower saying, check your own local newspaper. Are your favorite cartoonists still there?
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. At the Philadelphia Convention, which drafted the new Constitution for the United States, the delegates assumed that George Washington would become the nation's first president, and this encouraged them to propose strong, wide-ranging powers for the executive. The shortcomings of the Articles of Confederation had convinced the delegates that a weak executive was a mistake. They knew that many Americans were distrustful of a strong executive, but, as one delegate observed, the powers to be given to a president were shaped by opinions of Washington's virtues. Washington did not participate in the public debates over ratification, although his support was widely known and had a strong influence. Privately, he urged for ratification, urgently explaining to anti-federalist Patrick Henry that it is the best constitution that can be obtained, and this, or a dissolution of the Union, awaits our choice. Anticipating the outcome of the struggle over ratification, he wrote to Lafayette, A few short weeks will determine the political fate of America for the present generation, and probably produce no small influence on the happiness of society through a long succession of ages to come. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. How can unionized workers and unemployed workers stand together? Perhaps we can look to the past for examples of the power of such solidarity. On this day in labor history, the year was 1935. It was the height of the Great Depression. That April, workers who were part of the American Federation of Labor had gone out on strike against the electric auto light plant in Toledo, Ohio. Given the desperate economic times, only about half of the workers participated in the strike, and it seemed likely to fail. But then, the Lucas County Unemployment League joined the effort. An injunction had ruled that only 25 people could picket at a time. The Unemployed League ignored the injunction and crowded the picket lines. On May 21st, they called a meeting of 1,000 unemployed workers to the plant gates. With each passing day, the protests grew. They protested against the company and against the scabs who were brought in to break the strike. Finally, today in labor history, the sheriff decided to turn back the picketers. He marched on the protesting workers with men paid for by the National Guard. They let loose fire hoses and tear gas on the crowd. The picketers responded by throwing bricks and stones through the factory windows. The next day, the 900 National Guard troops marched on the picketers again. They fired their weapons into the unarmed crowd, killing 2 and wounding many more. Across Toledo, unions pledged to join a general strike. In response, the company capitulated, granting a 22% raise and union recognition for the workers. In 2001, a memorial honoring the strikers was commemorated in Toledo's Union Memorial Park. 2 bronze strikers, one male and one female, stand on opposite ends of a low wall. On the wall, the words inscribed read, "Increased wages and improved conditions." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Expecting a high of around 80 degrees today, about the same as what we had yesterday, and it was actually quite nice. Well, it'll be sunshine and clouds mixed throughout the day with winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear and partly cloudy overnight with lows in the upper 40s, low 50s. Winds continuing out of the northwest at 5 to 10. And then tomorrow, except for a few afternoon clouds, mainly sunny with highs in the mid-80s. Winds out of the northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And we do have a forecast of rain for Memorial Day weekend beginning on Friday. We'll see how that shakes out. Now, of course, the updates on the coronavirus pandemic, because it's not over, folks, are now only being updated once a week. So at the end of Friday, we stood at 437,052 confirmed cases, and our deceased stands at 537, and that was an increase from the week before. So we'll see what shakes out Tuesday to Wednesday on those assessments. Grass pollen is rated very high right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index, though, for the Rogue River Valley region is good at 38 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is very high at 8, so you better take care. Slather on the SPF 50 or whatever is safe for you. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.19 inches. Visibility is up to 9 miles, and relative humidity is at 65%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 65 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 63 and cloudy. Rome is 84 and fair. Kyiv is 63 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 60 degrees and clear. Hong Kong is 77 with a light rain shower. Tokyo is 64 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 56 with heavy rain showers. And San Francisco, California is 58 degrees and sunny. And New York is 68 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Jacob Furstein of the Washington Post brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A line of violent thunderstorms tore across the most populous corridor of Canada on Saturday, killing at least 5 people and cutting power to nearly 1 million. The storms carved a path of destruction from southern Ontario to southeast Quebec, passing close to or directly through 3 of Canada's 4 largest cities, Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa. Pearson International Airport, which serves the Toronto metro area and is the largest airport in the country, measured a wind gust of about 75 miles per hour. Ottawa International, another major hub, also recorded a 75 mile per hour gust.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Timothy Bella of the Washington Post brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Russia permanently banned nearly 1,000 Americans, including President Biden and Vice President Harris, from entering the country in response to the U.S.'s support of Ukraine and the historic sanctions facing Moscow nearly 3 months into its invasion. The Foreign Ministry published an updated list of 963 Americans barred from entering Russia. A wide collection ranging from the Biden administration members, Republicans, tech executives, journalists, lawmakers who have died, regular U.S. citizens, and even actor Morgan Freeman, but not Donald Trump. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.